Hey everybody, welcome to the video. It's Monday, August 9th, and we're breaking down this short but sweet 5-game main slate that we have over on DraftKings today. And with it being such a small slate, we actually do have a lot of good pitching options. There's a couple fun stacks to talk about as well, so it should be a good one. And if you do find this video helpful in any way possible, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet already. If you want to take that one step further and become an official Patreon member, link is down below in the description for that. And last but not least, this video is sponsored by PrizePicks. I'm sure most of you know what it is by now, but if you don't, it's daily fantasy sports simplified. It's just you versus the projections. There's no sharks, 150 max contests, or salary cap restrictions, or anything like that. Just you versus the props that they offer each and every single day. And as of right now, if you're a new signee over on PrizePicks, you can use code CPEN and get a free money bonus up to $100. It's an instant deposit match up to $100 if you use code CPEN and tell them I sent you. So it's free money. Want to use it to your advantage. But I think that's it for the plugs for the most part. So without further ado, let's dive into today's video. And as per usual, we'll start with the pitchers and move on to the bats. And like I was saying, there's quite a few good pitching options on today's slate. I mean, usually on a small slate, we'll probably have like 2 or 3 guys listed here, and even then we're kind of stretching it. But we actually have 5 really solid options today. Now, they're the 5 most expensive pitchers, but I mean, you have Tyon at below 8K, Joe Musgrove's in the mid 8K range, so it's not like we have like a ton of expensive pitching options here. And I was playing around some lineups, and you can kind of build whatever the heck you want here, so we really shouldn't have any restrictions when building lineups. But we'll start up top here with Freddie Peralta at $10,500. He's the most expensive pitcher on the slate, but he draws a great matchup versus the Chicago Cubs, a team that's really watered down at this point. They've lost pretty much all their best players. No Anthony Rizzo, no Chris Bryant, no Javier Baez at this point. So it's a really soft lineup, and the only downside I will say is that the projected weather, well, first off, I should mention it's supposed to rain, like a 40 to 50% chance for rain, so maybe this game doesn't even play. We'll have to revisit that when game time starts. I'm not going to try to guess what the weather is going to be like around 8 a.m., so hopefully it doesn't rain. But I want to mention that the wind's supposed to be blowing out, which is obviously not good for pitchers in Wrigley, because the way that stadium's constructed, when the wind's blowing out, that is a major boost to the bats. It's also like 90 to 100% like humidity in the forecast, which is obviously another huge boost for bats. So if you don't want to play Freddie Peralta, there's a couple reasons where you might not want to, because it should be prime hitting conditions, but you got to hit the ball first. And Freddie Peralta is a guy that can generate a lot of strikeouts, and the Cubs lineup, like I was mentioning, is really bad at this point. And even with all that weather being said, like Vegas looks into that stuff, they only have a 3.28 implied team total. He's a 73% chance for a win, which is a massive favorite, and a 7K prop as well. And if we're looking at his splits on the season, they're obviously pretty darn good. He walks a lot of guys, but a 34.5% K rate, a Sierra below 3.5, a real nice 2.21 ERA, only a 135 batting average given up, a 125 ISO allowed, and a 27.3% hard contact rate, with less than a homer allowed per 9 innings. And like I mentioned earlier, the Cubs lineup is just pretty bad, and they do strike out quite a bit versus right-handed pitching. Obviously, you lose that free strikeout in Javier Baez, but I mean, at least you lose the power as well. So I think Freddie Peralta, if you got the money for him, is obviously an excellent option here. It's just the environment, the weather environment, it's not looking too well for him, but I think he can make up for that with strikeouts and obviously the good matchup versus the Cubs. And then Luis Castillo here, $10,000. Beginning of the season, he was very shaky. Ever since then, though, he's been really, really good. He's got the strikeout rate up now to 23%, which obviously doesn't look that great, but in the beginning of the season, it was below 20%, so he's trending in the right direction here. It's only been up since then. Hasn't really given up too much power this season. He's got an xFIP below 4, even though the Sierra's at 4.2. But this matchup versus Cleveland is pretty good. Now, I've actually been kind of stacking Cleveland the past few days because they've had some pretty solid matchups, and they do have 4.25 implied team total here, but I'm not really concerned about the Cleveland lineup versus Luis Castillo. Yeah, there's a couple good bats like Jose Ramirez and Pennell Reyes, but if you can get around them, you only have to kind of like beat Miles Straw. And in the end of the lineup, we have like guys like Ernie Clement and some really bad bats there. So I think Luis Castillo is a fine tournament option today. Not sure if I get to him in cash games, because we got guys like Joe Musgrove, who I feel like has similar upside to Castillo on this slate, and he's $1,500 cheaper. Giolito $700 cheaper, and Tyon, who's been on a roll, he's like $2,000 some cheaper. So I don't think Castillo is the must on this slate, but I do find him as an interesting option because he is facing a pretty bad Cleveland team right now. He's on the road, which Cleveland isn't really the best place to pitch, but I guess it's better than Great American Small Park, so that's the one boost for him. But he's more of a turn option for me, but I think he is viable on today's slate. Lucas Giolito, $9,300. This guy is very hit or miss. Like, there's some times where he is on fire, where he scores 30+ fantasy points, and there's some where he looks like an absolute bottom of the rotation kind of pitcher, where he generates like 2 to 4 strikeouts and gets beat up, which is what happened last time out versus the Kansas City Royals. I think he finished like the game with like 0 -2 points with 2 strikeouts. Like, he's a very hit or miss pitcher, so you got to be careful with him. Maybe more so suited for tournaments, similar to Castillo in my opinion, but he's a good pitcher. It's just he can be very on or off. So I hate trying to guess if he's going to be on. And matchup versus the Twins isn't exactly my favorite. Like, yeah, they lost Nelson Cruz, but there's still some decent bats in that lineup. But looking at splits in the season, I mean, they're fine. ERA's below 4, xFIP's at 3.85, Sierra's around 3.77, 28% K rate. The one problem with him is that he gives up a lot of power. A 181 ISO given up with a 43% fly ball rate and 1.5 homers per 9. And there's a couple lefties in this lineup that can hit for power versus righties. So you gotta be a little bit careful here, but I think Giolito's a fine option. 7K prop over in Vegas, pretty heavy favorite there. I think the White Sox stack does look pretty good today versus Burrows, but I think Giolito is fine in tournaments. Not sure I'd get there in cash games today. And then Joe Musgrove, $8,500. I feel like he is your cash game pitcher today. Like, if I'm deciding between Giolito or Joe Musgrove for cash games, I'm gonna side with Musgrove. Plus, you save what, $700, $700, and you could probably afford a more expensive bat there. And his numbers in the season have been pretty much better than Giolito, and he draws a fantastic matchup versus Miami. It's not in Miami, so it's not quite the pitcher's park, but San Diego is a pretty good place to pitch from Petco. And only a 2.98 implied team total here, which is the lowest on the slate. Miami's lineup right now is really, really bad. I say this every single time, but I gotta mention it. They lost Marte, they lost Duvall, and their numbers on the season were already really bad versus righties. So when you take them out of the equation, it definitely gets even worse. Like these numbers suck. They're worse versus lefties, but they're still not very good versus righties. A 25% K rate, only a 142 team ISO, 298 WOBA, and a 90 WRC plus. I know Musgrove can be a bit hit or miss, but the past couple starts for him have been pretty solid. He had that amazing game versus the Colorado Rockies where he had 11 strikeouts. Last start versus Oakland was okay, where he had around 18 fantasy points, but these numbers on the season are good. 3.5 xFIP, 3.47 Sierra, close to a 28% K rate. Not really walking too many guys. Doesn't give up too much power. Has a lean to the ground balls, but a homer allowed per 9. I think Musgrove is probably the best pitching option on today's slate once you factor in the price tag. So I would assume he's going to be the highest on pitcher in cash games as well. So if you want to fade that in tournaments, you could. But I mean, I would have no confidence stacking Miami. I mean, that team just sucks right now. So definitely like Musgrove quite a bit today. And then Jameson Taillon, $7,800, gets a pretty good matchup here versus the Royals. I don't really strike out too much, but Taillon's been very good the past several starts now. He's been like scoring like 18, 20 some fantasy points, it feels like, for the past month or so now, and he's only $7,800. So I would assume you're gonna pair up Joe Musgrove with an expensive pitching option like Freddie Peralta or something like that. But if you want to go the double spend down with Musgrove and Taillon here and just afford a bunch of expensive bets, I would not be totally opposed against that. Just know, I mean, guys like Peralta and Castillo, they got strikeout upside, so did Giolito, so you gotta be a little bit careful there. But with the way Taillon's been pitching, I mean, $7,800 just seems a bit too cheap in my opinion. My projections like him point per dollar wise quite a bit. Looking at his numbers in the season, they're not amazing, but they're solid enough for his price point on today's slate. 24% K rate, ERA's around 4. The xFIP and Sierra about a little bit higher, half a run higher, but I mean, the Royals aren't really that great of a hitting team. Outside of Salvador Perez, you're not really too concerned with anybody in that lineup. The one problem with Taillon I will mention is that the power is pretty high, giving up a 190 ISO on the season with about 1.5 homers allowed per 9, but doesn't really give up too much hard contact, 28.3%, which is actually less than Joe Musgrove and really not too far off of guys like Freddie Peralta and Luis Castillo. So I think Taillon's fine for the price point. The Royals this season versus righties, 86 WRC plus, 297 WOBA, 143 ISO. They don't strike out very much, but the power numbers are really weak. And so from a run prevention standpoint, I think Taillon will be fine. If you want to pick up the win, I think the Yankee stack is somewhat interesting today. I'm not going to talk about them, but I think they are viable. They have a team total close to 6 versus Carlos Hernandez, but he hasn't really been that bad this year, so I don't really want to stack the Yankees up too much today, but I think they're fine as maybe some one-offs or mini stacks. But I think Taillon is fine for the price point. But with that being said, I think that'll be pretty much it for the pitching, so we can move right over to today's stacks. But I want to talk about the Cincinnati Reds here first in the Battle of Ohio versus a bad lefty right now that Cleveland's putting on the mound today. And while I prefer some of these guys versus left-handed pitching, I don't think he's going to last too long, so I think they'll see a righty at some point anyway. But the righties here do look pretty good, because if we look at his splits in the season so far, the guy is really struggling versus right-handed bats. I mean, overall, the guy's just not very good, giving up a 171 ISO, only 20% K rate, ERA close to 8 and over a 5 xFIP and a 12% walk rate with a 35.6% hard contact rate. But if you look specifically versus righties, the ERA is close to 10, about a 5 xFIP, 20% K rate, 223 ISO allowed, close to 2 homers allowed per 9, and over a 36% hard contact rate. So they're actually going to grade out pretty well here. Now, the lineup is kind of lefty heavy, so I prefer this team versus right-handed pitching, but I mean, I think they're all going to be fine. But Jonathan India, Nick Castellanos would be the main appeal here. I'm assuming we could see Tyler Stevenson in the lineup. As of right now, everyone has Tucker Barnhart projected to be in the lineup, but if it's Tyler Stevenson, he should be hitting around like the 3 to 4 to 5 hole there. So if he's in the lineup, he hits left-handed pitching pretty well, so he would definitely be in consideration for me. But as of right now, I'm seeing Tucker Barnhart. But you can use lefties or righties here. I think it's all fine. But the main appeal, like I said, the righties, and specifically Nick Castellanos, he's pretty much my favorite play in the slate. I believe he's my highest owned or my highest projected bat today, and he's only $4,000. So he's going to be pretty much a must play for me in cash games today. And he's pretty much my overall favorite bet on the slate. Like, he is crushing left-handed pitching this year, and there's no reason for him to be $4,000 and India to be like $5K, Winker to be nearly $6,000, everyone else around $6,000. He shouldn't be that cheap compared to everybody else, so I definitely have a lot of interest here. He's batting .310 against lefties this season with a .241 ISO, 134 WRC plus, and just some really good numbers overall with a 50% hard contact rate, just about that. So love Castellanos on this slate. The righties look very good, but you can definitely full stack this lineup with the team total 5.25 here. And then moving on to the Milwaukee Brewers here, like I was mentioning earlier with Freddie Peralta, it's going to be some pretty good hitting conditions in Wrigley today as long as they can play. Because like I said, there was some weather in the forecast, so you got to be careful with that. Hopefully the game can play, and if it does, I mean, this is a good spot for the Milwaukee Brewers. Alec Mills is not the worst pitcher out there. ERA and XFIP around 4.25, but only a 16% K rate. Does have a lean to the ground balls, doesn't really give up a ton of power, but the wind should be blowing out. It's like 90 to 100% like humidity. As of right now, I'm not trying to project the weather too much like at 8 a.m., but this is what it says for me as of right now. And if that's the case, pretty good hitting conditions here, and Vegas would agree at 5.72 implied team total for the Milwaukee Brewers, and this whole lineup is in play for me. Colton Wong, he can hit right-handed pitching pretty well. Willy Adames has been amazing ever since he's got traded to Milwaukee. I'm not sure what's going on. I'm not sure if he's taking PEDs, but ever since he went to Milwaukee, the guy has been awesome. It's been a great park shift for him, but they're not playing Milwaukee today, but I'm just saying in general. Christian Yelich, he has been very bad for a couple seasons now, but I like him in a left and righty matchup versus Alec Mills here, batting in a good spot in the order. Eduardo Escobar got traded here from Arizona. He's got plenty of pop in his bat. $5,000 is a bit steep, though. By batting cleanup, he's definitely going to be in play for me. Omar Narvaez, he hits right-handed pitching pretty well for around a 300 batting average. Avisel Garcia, prefer him versus lefties, but he's got pop versus either lefties or righties. Rowdy Tellez, just a cheap left and righty matchup there, but hits near the bottom of the order. Then Lorenzo Cain, dirt cheap. I prefer him versus lefties, but again, this whole lineup is stackable for me. I think you can make a case for the Brewers being the best stack on the slate. The Cincinnati Reds are right up there with them, but these are definitely my two favorite stacks on today's slate, and they have a team total close to 6. Like I said, good hitting conditions. Very good spot here for the Milwaukee Brewers. And the last team I want to talk about is the Chicago White Sox, and I'm actually not a huge fan of the White Sox today, but I definitely think they're an interesting stack. I just don't want to talk about two teams, Brewers and Reds, to be done with it, so I'm going to throw the White Sox on here just because it's an overall good team. They have a team total around 5.5 here. It's an interesting matchup versus Burrows. We don't have a big sample size on the guy. I think he's thrown like 8 innings this season. In those 8 innings, those numbers look very, very awful, but I don't want to use it as a sample size whatsoever. But if you guys want to at least look at it, I mean, he's got a 7.91 on XFIP with an 11 ERA, 14% K rate, and a 317 ISO allowed. Again, 8 inning sample size, so we can't really put too much into it. I can't imagine he'll be in this game very long. But the White Sox do have a good offense. Tim Anderson, $6,100. He had a leadoff homer yesterday in the showdown slate. If you guys were playing that or just keeping up with baseball late in the day. Cesar Hernandez, $4,200. I could see him being a popular option today just because he's a second baseman. He hits near the top of the order, pretty cheap on a good team, and a switch hitter. I mean, he looks like an interesting option here. Jose Abreu, obviously very expensive, but he's got a ton of power in his bat. Yohan Moncada, switch hitter. Eloy Menez, he's hit for some pop ever since he's returned, but the overall numbers aren't amazing, but he had a homer in the first inning yesterday as well. Robert is expected to be back in the lineup, so that's a boost for the offense. He's only $3,400. I think you could certainly have some interest in him. He's batting .316 on the season and 103 plate appearances with a 127 WRC plus. Good one versus a righty, Andrew Vaughn. Definitely prefer him versus lefties, but if you're looking for a cheap homer, it's certainly possible. He's got a 193 ISO on the season. And then Zavala here, $2,600. If you're looking for a dirt cheap catcher on a good team today, I think he's fine. If you're looking at his numbers this season, he's got a terrible batting average of 229, but it's only 43 plate appearances. But he does have a 314 ISO and a 142 WRC plus. Now that's getting boosted a little bit from that 3-homer game, but he's not bad for his price point. And if you're just looking for a cheap option on a good team today, I don't hate the idea of going with that if Tucker Barnhart's not your cup of tea, or Tyler Stevenson, whoever's starting for the Cincinnati Reds today. But I do think this team is playable. I don't think they'll be quite as popular as the Reds or the Brewers today. So if you're looking to get a little bit different, I think they're fine. I think them and the Yankees are kind of like on the same tier today. But if I had to pick between the two, I'm going to side with the White Sox on today's slate. But with that being said, I think that'll be pretty much it for the video. It's short and sweet, but there wasn't a lot to talk about because it's a small slate. So hopefully it was helpful, and if it was, make sure to leave a like. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet already. Follow me over on social media if you want. ChrisPennell16 on Twitter, CPen16 over on IG. And if you want to become a Patreon member, links down below in the description for that. And don't forget, this video was sponsored by Prize Picks. It's daily fantasy sports simplified. And as of right now, if you're a new signee, you get a free money bonus up to $100 when you use code CPEN and tell them I sent you. But I think that'll be pretty much it. I will stop rambling, and I hope you guys enjoy this start to your week.